This podcast deals with themes, languages, and situations that may not be suitable for young audiences. If you're under the age of 18, parental guidance isn't going to help you here. Welcome to Now Open the Podcast, the sex education podcast that's more sex than education. I'm Trisha.
And I'm Jobim.
This week, we break down that thing Vin Diesel keeps making movies about. The controversial, the traditional, the Filipino family. I hate you, Jobim. This is part one of Sinong, Tatay mo, gender roles in the Filipino family, where we'll talk about what defines a Filipino family and maybe get some insight into our mothers so you can finally forgive her. Trigger warnings, potential scenarios of abuse, and sensitive family dynamics ahead. If you're listening live and like what you hear, you can join the discussion by leaving a comment below, and if we have the time, we'll get to it as the show goes on. So first things first, Jobim, what comes to mind when you think of family, and what was your family like growing up?
Oh man, those are two very different questions. When I think of family, I obviously think of the Fast and the Furious movies because I've been conditioned by society to think that. But my family growing up was, and I'd forgotten that I often used to use this growing up because I'd stopped at a certain point and just remembered recently is I come from a broken home. I come from a broken family. My parents split up when I was about 9 or 10 years old. So I did not have a typical upbringing. I wish I could have, I could say that my parents did their best to co-parent, but that's just not what happened. So yeah, my family was very non-traditional growing up. It started off traditional, so I got to experience some of that, which is probably why I resent it disappearing so much. It's because I had a taste of it. You know, I knew what it was like, and then one day gone, and then life never went back to normal. What was yours?
Well, I guess in a sense, I did grow up in a traditional family. I had a mom, I had a dad, both stayed together until my dad's very last breath. But I guess stayed together in a very bare minimum sense of the word.
In a very Catholic sense of the word.
They lived in the same house up until my dad died. They definitely did not go through any kind of separation procedures, but I'm pretty sure that's just the Catholic part of my mom coming through. But they weren't really a couple anymore towards the end.
Right.
That's
how you know that they're a Filipino couple. They're a traditional Filipino couple. They're still together to the very end. They hate each other.
Yeah, that was an interesting time growing up because like you're as a child you are very much aware of the tension in your family.
Right.
And because you're very much aware of the tension in your family, that really defines how you relate to either parent. Mm-hmm. You know, and because Absolutely. Of that, right? And because of that, like I would say that who I am today is because of the tensions that existed in my household. So, I
mean, I know it's very Freudian to say, but the relationships that you have with your parents, with your family dynamics from a very young age will also help inform and come to define in some way, shape or form, how you relate to the opposite sex. So your future relationships are affected by your relationship with your parents and how you see your parents treating one another.
That is true because like they are your first model of what a relationship looks like. They also model how you emotionally regulate, how you communicate.
Yes. What is acceptable? What is acceptable in a relationship? What abuse is acceptable? How it is acceptable to be treated? How you're supposed to resolve problems? I had none of that. I had none of that insight because I never saw healthy arguments play out in my household. Never.
Absolutely.
All the arguments in my household growing up with just one parent, I realized way too late in my life that the parent that left was the defender, right? Was the one who stood between us and the abusive parent. It was because she was not able to discipline us that the abusive parent was sicked on us when they were still together. You know what I mean? He was the disciplinarian because she couldn't. And then after she left, we didn't realize what had been protecting us this whole time. And so I did not know what a healthy argument was like for most of my childhood and all up until my adulthood. I did not know what a healthy argument was supposed to sound like.
And I like how we're talking about this we're like saying we have non-traditional families because your parents split up. Mine really should have.
Right.
But
right.
So we keep calling these like a non-traditional family setup or non-traditional family dynamics, but very anecdotal evidence based on conversations I've had with friends. It seems like it's extremely uncommon or less common to have somebody whose family is still together both in the Catholic sense and the emotional sense.
Right. You'll find a lot of families who are still with parents who are still together, but emotionally they've checked out. I mean, like cheating is so rampant in the Philippines. You and your friends each have a friend or have gone to school with someone whose parents have cheated on one another. They're sleeping with this and that. And if you don't, I got bad news for you. It's you. You're the one whose parents are fucking around.
So I think maybe we have to define what a traditional Filipino family is for the purposes of this discussion, because it seems like our particular experiences don't seem to match a traditional Filipino family. So how is the Filipino family defined? Well, it's the atom of Filipino society.
Right. It is the mitochondria of the cell that is the Philippines. It is the powerhouse of the Philippine cell.
It is the smallest unit upon which the entire nation is sitting very precariously upon.
You learn that in social sciences and you sort of roll your eyes, right? Because it seems like government propaganda to be like, respect your parents. But yeah, it's true. Your family is the smallest unit of society. It is where your values and beliefs are first forged and hammered out. They are the beliefs that you carry out with you into the world that will later on be challenged. So these are your family defines your base stats, as I like to think, right? Your family defines your base stats. Some people come from certain family dynamics which leave them with high EQ. Some people have family dynamics that are the opposite. But I think what we learned in social studies is the traditional Filipino family, right? The traditional Catholic Filipino family must be a man and a woman, being a mother and a father, to 12 children who will then take turns going to college until one of them becomes a doctor. That is a traditional Filipino family.
That's codified into law.
Yes.
And yeah, what you said about your family basically deciding your base stats, it's very true, especially in our society, because Filipinos, we highly value blood relations and marriage relations. You know, like one of the reasons why my parents wouldn't split up is because of that very Catholic belief of what God put together, no man shall tear apart or whatever. And that also very Catholic idea of I'm your mom, I'm your dad, you're my child. We are a family unit. And no matter what happens, that's going to remain the same. And I think a lot of this is because of that religious background. But basically, the elements of a Filipino family are really not far off from what you just described. It's family-centered. It's child-centric. Typically, the Filipino family is defined by a large family size. It's very uncommon to see like single child households here.
Well, traditionally, yes. Especially if you go out into the In the city, I think families might be getting smaller, especially among upper middle class families, because it just makes more sense.
And you can afford family planning.
Right. And to jump on Trish's point earlier, like if you come from a certain family, they super care about what family the person you're dating comes from. It's not just important. Like families in the Philippines are not just important in the sense that you have a good family, but the people that you surround yourself with come from good families. You know, it's a big deal. So your family's reputation is a big deal. Your family's like what your family does is a big deal.
Yeah, and that's just because when we think of family here, it's like your closest ties. It's
right.
The ties that can never be broken no matter what. So the people that you do surround yourself with, because they're family, it does reflect on you. And we protect our families here.
I can't speak for other cultures because I haven't really been immersed in other cultures for too long. But here, you're kind of, to a certain extent, defined by your last name, aren't you? Like, if they know what family you come from, they already get a kind of good idea of who you are.
Yeah, and like right? As customer Matt says, like the surname really comes into play because when we talk about family here, we're not just talking about your immediate family. We're also talking about your extended family, your lolos and lolas, your titos and titas. Like in my mom's side alone, I think I have 24 cousins. I think.
There you go. I think for my one tito, he has like 9 kids, I think. 8 or 9 kids.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Very fertile.
Extremely fertile, yes. If you can't already tell, the Javieres are we are a fertile breed. Having children when we don't even intend to.
So, in your particular family, who was cooler, your mom or your dad? I think I know the answer.
That's a very
you need some time
question. Because it varies, right? Depending on what you're talking about. Who's cooler, mom and dad? If you were to ask me at the time of my parents' separation, who's cooler, mom or dad? I would have said dad, because when they asked us, you know, who do you want to stay with? We all said dad. Dad makes the money, and because he wasn't because the times that he would spend with us were so few and far between, he'd make sure that they were quality time, right? And our mom was taking care of the day-to-day stuff. And you overlook that. You take that stuff for granted, right? So who's the cool parent? Who's the parent you're going to want to stay with? Obviously, the parent who's always fun. Obviously, the parent that's always good times parent, right? But good times parent doesn't always necessarily mean attentive or good parent. And so if you ask me who's cooler now, like I drink and smoke with my mom. You know what I mean? I can literally get drunk with I don't think I've ever drank with my dad, like to the point of getting. I think he used to have a drinking problem. I think I remember him telling me a story of how he got like drunk once and then went on stage and forgot the lyrics, and then his other band members were like, "All right, that's enough of that," and he just stopped drinking after that.
That's enough of that. That is done.
Yep. So it's a tricky question. Who's cooler, mom or dad? I think you'd have to. That would depend on what stage in my life you're asking me. What about you?
Well,
who is the cooler parent? I know the answer to this faux show with you.
Oh yeah. Well, my dad was no doubt the cooler parent. Although there was a time when they were both cool. I mean, they got together at some point.
Yes. Yes. There was a time they were both cool. They could balance that shit. You know, they were like, yeah, we'll play good cop, bad cop sometimes.
Yeah, there was a time when they were both partying. They were both really progressive, both ran in the same circle and maybe had similar beliefs. Who knows? But that time is long gone. And when I was growing up, it was definitely my dad who was the cooler parent because my mom was more religious. My dad tended to give me a lot more freedom, a lot more agency. I felt more, I guess, respected as a person by my dad. And like, it was a very, very big difference. You have like your authoritarian mom figure, and then your chillax hippie dad kind of guy who also had his own like disciplinarian thing going on. You know, he was still like that stoic dad figure, but he was also half white. So when I'm talking about like, do I have in terms of like the Filipino family, it's a little bit skewed. He is Filipino, but he's half white, and that the
Right.
whiteness really comes through.
The whiteness really comes through.
It really comes through. It's very evident. But in a study by Alamapay and Hoxon in 2011, they found that compared to Filipino fathers, Filipino mothers generally tend to be more likely to espouse progressive attitudes, such as granting their children more agency and independence and encouragement to express themselves. So I did not have that in particular dynamic because that was my dad.
I think vocally, this was my dad. I think vocally, he would definitely espouse, going out there and being more, taking risks and stuff like that. But in practice, he only kind of wanted you to do them on things that he approved of. I think, which is the opposite with my mom, who is verbally will speak out about being very cautious and stuff, but is emotionally more encouraging when it comes to you pursuing what you want to do.
Well, what about in terms of discipline? Who was more the disciplinarian in your family?
Oh, well, my mom wasn't around. Let's get that one straight. That one straight. By no, not for lack of trying, right? But my dad just wasn't having it. She was not allowed to see us nearly as much as she would have liked, especially at the start of the separation. So there was no discipline coming from my mom. And because she knew that the pressure was down on her because we were living with her dad, and my dad was just like gaslighting us 24/7 about our mom, like you're living with a parent with a very bitter dude. So he's like, I wonder how much I can brainwash my fucking kids, man. I wonder if I can get them to like hate her to her core. And so she already knew that she had to like put her best foot forward. So even I guess when she wanted to discipline us, right, she was already like, I'm on thin ice with the kids. I just want to have the best relationship I can with them. So she couldn't, right? And my dad would only discipline us when things reflected badly on him. If you could get away with bad things without him ever finding out about it, you're good, you're golden. But if it ever got back to him, you done fucked up.
Did you get disciplined a lot as a child?
Define discipline.
Like punished, grounded.
You see, I think discipline is
a nice tap on the butt with the chinelas.
I think discipline is different from punishment. Discipline is when something is done to you to rectify your action. It's corrective.
Fair enough.
Right? I was punished a lot. I was yelled at a lot. A lot of things were said to me that I don't think parents should say to their children. And so I don't count it as discipline because it did not have a disciplinary effect on me.
What about who was the more authoritarian type parent? I guess it would be your dad in this case because he was the one at home.
Mm-hmm.
So, like this, the same study by Alamapay and Hoxon found that mothers and fathers, although they have a difference in how progressive their attitudes are, they don't really differ in their authoritarian attitudes. So the expectations that Filipino mothers and fathers have on their children, they tend to both expect their children to obey adults and authority figures in general. Mm-hmm. And like this is really consistent with the prevailing social attitude of respect, seniority, and obedience towards elders. It's such a huge thing here, that hierarchy of anak ka lang.
Yes, do as I say, not as I do. How dare you? Because you are a child, because they sired you, you have no right to your opinion. You have no right to say anything. And they love to bring up how back in their day, they couldn't even say shit to their parents, man. They couldn't talk. I could never talk to my parents the way you talk to me. I could never.
Did your parents ever talk about the insane and absolutely egregious punishments they went through as children to justify the slightly less egregious but still egregious punishments that they enacted on you?
We had very different childhoods because my dad would regale me in the ridiculously over the top punishments that his parents would do to him, and then he would reenact them with me.
Oh no!
And this is how that works. Here, kneel on these stones.
In my mom's case, it was rice. And like
rice.
It's really interesting because like when I was starting to go into BDSM, slight segue into BDSM, but When I was trying to think of punishments to put people through, I was literally just listing down the things my mom used to make me do as a child. Face the wall.
Face the wall, arms outstretched.
Yeah, kneel on these rice grains. They're really excellent for BDSM, not great for children.
Yeah, not so great. Oh man, it might get too real for me if somebody's like kneel on it in a sexual situation. Like kneel on, face this wall. I'm like no.
In my particular case, like my mom was the one espousing those beliefs of you must respect your father and mother. Like one of the number one things I heard at home was the fourth commandment. Okay, I'm not even sure if it's the fourth commandment, but I'm pretty sure it's the fourth commandment because my mom would always say that. Respect your father and your mother. You know, anytime that you would like rebel against them or try to ask why they're
the fourth commandment is the Sabbath day, keep it holy. I think.
I have no clue. I honestly haven't gone to church in a very long time. One of them commandments.
Was your mom always invoking that sort of that final argument of you're just the child? Was that brought up in your household a lot?
It wasn't just my mom, I guess. Like in a previous episode, I mentioned how parents would always be like, or older people would always be like, children should be seen and not heard. You know, there's always this hierarchy of how much space you're able to take up as a child, I guess, because you're young and they don't look at you as a human being. Because they look at you as their property.
As a parent, it's kind of hard. I mean, you should listen to your kids, right? And I'm thinking of all the times that I think I should have been heard as a child, that I had needs and wants that if they had just paid attention, they would have known that things would have turned out better for everybody. But it's hard to differentiate because you as an adult know better. You know, so if your kid says, I don't want to eat vegetables, you know, they still have to eat vegetables, right? You still have to make them do it, right? So it's knowing the difference between whether you're making them do something for them or you're making them do it for you, right? Because if it's just to fulfill something you have, then you're not really listening if they say they don't want to do it.
You want to take us into the news, Jabim?
What? Oh, yes. Okay. All right. So, and now the newsstand. Before we get back to the discussion tonight, here is the newsstand. Last week, in a landmark ruling, Mexico's Supreme Court ruled that criminal penalties for terminating pregnancies are unconstitutional. This means that in the state of Coahuila, women cannot be persecuted for getting an abortion. This decision could pave the way for decriminalization across the country. Coahuila borders the U.S. state of Texas, where the Supreme Court allowed a state law banning all abortions after 6 weeks of pregnancy.
It's so wild how you have Texas right across the border and they cannot have abortions past 6 weeks. And in most cases, most women don't even know that they are pregnant at 6 weeks. What is 6 weeks? That's a month and a half.
We didn't know until we were 5 months.
Okay, that's ridiculous. But
we took 2 pregnancy tests, and they both came back negative. Each time we took them, they came back negative, right? So screw those pregnancy tests. 5 months, dude. She wasn't showing. So I mean, like, yeah, it seems ridiculous to me that the cutoff is 6 weeks. But then again, it is a sticky area.
Right. The first trimester is 12 weeks, so this is basically half of that. And again, most people don't even know they're pregnant at this stage. And right across the border, you have Mexico, who, congratulations for, it's not exactly decriminalizing abortion, but at least it might pave the way for it. And again, as we talked about in last week's newsstand, this is a very important aspect of sexual and reproductive health care. So congratulations, Mexico, and hopefully Philippines.
Hopefully, I doubt it. I doubt it. But see, here's the thing: if Mexico can do it, and Mexico is such a Catholic country, Mexico is such a Catholic country. We're basically the Mexicans of Asia, right? Because Spain also
And
went
that's
and
not
colonized.
even
They basically did the same thing to us. So,
and it's not even like a joke, because a lot of some Spanish people who came here were actually Mexicans that they drafted into their army or whatever. So like we are,
there
some
you
of
go,
us
are actually Mexican descent. But what was my point?
if they can do it, so can we.
The 6 week thing bothers me because in Texas bothers me because there's so many women. I'm not a period expert. I'm not even a vagina expert. But to my knowledge, there's so many women who are irregular. For a lot of women, missing your period for 6 weeks is not a cause for alarm. It's not a big deal. At that point, a lot of these women wouldn't even be taking pregnancy tests. So why would they know? I think 6 weeks is a ridiculous amount to cap off. You know, like when abortion should be ethical. As long as that discussion is still on the table, I think that 6 months, 6 weeks is a pretty ridiculous.
Well, what Texas basically did is they can't legally, I think, make abortion illegal. I'm not sure how Roe versus Wade works and federal / state law works, but I'm not sure if they can make abortion entirely illegal, but what they can do is make it really, really difficult to get one, so that virtually nobody can get one. And because they just don't want to have any abortion, so they're just finding ways to really clamp down on it so that it doesn't get anywhere. And shame on you, Texas.
And Viva la Mexico. That was it for the newsstand. Now sitting down. Now on to the show.
All right. So I have a question for you, Jobim.
Mm-hmm.
Would you say your mom is a typical Filipino mom?
No. I would say that my mom is a typical Catholic. I think that my mom.
There's overlap for sure.
Yeah, there's super overlap. There's a lot of ways my mom is super traditional, a traditional Filipino mom, but there are also a lot of ways that she's not. Also, a lot of ways my mom's pretty progressive. So,
in which ways is she like a typical Filipino mom?
It's weird that I equate typical Filipino mom with not being progressive, right? Because it's just not. I just don't think.
Filipino moms are more progressive than Filipino fathers.
Yeah, that's not saying a lot. That's not saying a lot.
The bar is low.
Yeah, the bar is very low.
Tatay Digong is our bar.
Mm-hmm. There you go. You're saying moms are more progressive than him?
Filipino father.
Okay,
I hope so.
My mom. What was the question? What are the things that my mom values?
Which parts of your mother? Yeah. Which parts of your mom are the traditional, typical Filipino?
Well, she's very Catholic. She's very Catholic, and she's very, I would say, she tries not to be. She tries her best, but she does have a tendency to be overbearing, as moms do. You know, she just wants to do her best. She just wants to be as involved as she can, and there's a phantom umbilical cord that just floats around, you know, your mom all the time that links you to her. Even you think she doesn't know, but you trip, and she's like, oh. My child is in danger, you know. So she's very Filipino like that, in the way that she loves and cares, and that sometimes it is too much.
So, according to certain studies, Filipino mothers placed greater value on respectfulness as a long-term socialization goal for their children, whereas mothers in America showed a preference for individual autonomy and a capacity for empathy. Now, this is an interesting comparison. I like that they compared it to America. Not that America's our benchmark or anything.
No, I think it's interesting because you get to see the difference in how children are raised. Again, I'm not an expert on Western culture, and of course, television shows are ramped up to, you know, for entertainment value. But I'm inclined to believe that difficult children are more of a Western, American, British phenomenon rather than Asian, because Asians will watch these shows where these kids are just off the chain, and they think, I would never be able to get away with that with my mom. You just have too much respect for your mom or too much fear of your mom. Right? So they may prefer individual autonomy and capacity for empathy, but just how successful are they in achieving that? In the same sense, how successful are Filipino moms in drilling in respectfulness to their sons, because we're notorious for not being Filipino men are notorious for not being respectful, especially towards women.
Oh yeah, there's nothing here about the success rate of any of these things. It's just that Filipino mothers really value teaching their children about respect.
Yes.
And I definitely would say my mom's a typical Filipino mom in this sense, because like from a young age, again, respect your mother and your father. Don't talk back. Listen to authority figures. These were things that were drilled into me as a child. Did not listen. Didn't work even then. But there was an attempt. Absolutely. And she definitely did place great value on it. But also, Filipino mothers are more likely to value qualities associated with achievements, such as being talented, smart, hardworking, goal-oriented, and responsible. Did you feel this from your own mother, that she was the one who was more like, I'm proud of you, you're doing well?
When I was in a musical, I think you can count on maybe one hand the number of shows my mom missed.
Oh,
yeah. My mom is like my biggest fan, dude. Like my mom thinks I can do
so
anything.
sweet.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that answers your question.
Yeah, that it really seemed like she was invested in your success, and she wanted to see you perform the shit out of that, and you won an award. So I think she's very proud of you. Probably.
She was upset that she was not mentioned in the thank you speech.
You didn't mention your own mother who missed.
No, because I made a joke about my dad being dead. Right. In my speech, I made a joke about my dad being dead, and I just didn't know where to put my mom in there, because that was the punchline. That was the end of it. That was the end of the joke. It was like I'd like to dedicate this award to my dad, that wherever you may be. You know, that was the joke. So I'm gonna follow up with my mom, who's like at home.
But hey, so, she went to see your shows.
Yes.
And that's that's really cool.
And I know that your mom recently made an effort to tune in to one of our Twitter events.
My mom is a very interesting person in the sense that she disapproves of a lot of the things I do, and yet she supports me nonetheless.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. That's pretty amazing, I think.
Or she tries to support the things I do. Like she tries to support the podcast. She tries to support our events, even though I think she commented something about like, oh, I'm too old for this discussion. And definitely very conservative. Right. I was swearing in that event. It's still weird to swear around your Filipino mom. It's still very strange.
Has your relationship dynamic with your mom changed at all during the pandemic?
I think it didn't change so much during the pandemic. Oh no, it did. It did change a lot during the pandemic. Now that I've taken 2 seconds to take stock of my life. Yeah, because like during the pandemic, her business struggled. So I've been in constant contact with her to try and figure out, what to do about it. So it has been something that I've been working on her with, and I don't like if you asked me 5 years ago to work with my mother, I would be like, fuck no.
No, hell no.
Hell no. Hail to the no. Again, because of that whole, respect authority type of thing. And now that I'm an adult and I'm taking over the business, or I'm working with her on the business, it's like, I can't do this respect authority thing anymore, because I'm not your employee. I'm your partner now. I'm your business partner. So
right.
There was that disconnect when we were first starting to work together, because of that whole, I still had to respect her and defer to her decisions. But at some point I had to set boundaries and be like, if I'm going to come on this team, we have to work here as partners and not as you telling me what to do or you like vetoing my decisions.
I think that children instinctively spend their lives trying to become peers with their parents, whether it be, oh, look, I am an adult because I am paying rent. I have my own place. Or, oh, look, I am an adult because I have reached the same position as you in the company when you used to work. Or I am an adult now because I am a parent like you. And we keep on trying to reach this point where we're peers with our parents until we realize that the value of parents is that they are not our peers. is that they will forever be our parents. They will forever, until they're gone. They're like, they're supposed to be that source of like security. They're supposed to be anyway, if they're good. And you just realize that there is comfort in not being up here with your parent, as long as you have healthy boundaries as a parent and child.
So during the pandemic, it seems like a lot of things have changed for Filipino mothers. According to my research by Potestades in 2020, Filipino mothers have increasingly chosen freelancing work because it allows them to make an income while fulfilling their roles as mothers in both the home and in the community. And we noted in a previous episode about how the pandemic has disproportionately affected women or mothers, because they're the ones who are more likely to take time off from work to come and do full-time childcare now that schools are no longer open. And yeah, they're more likely to be the one to make those sacrifices. Right. Or if they're a single parent, which tend to be single mothers more than they are single fathers in this country, they have to somehow now juggle both a career and childcare. So working from home and freelance has been one way for some women or some mothers who are able to have access to the internet or work from home options.
Only
a lot of them are doing that. You know what? Like, that's a whole episode, I think. We're going to have to talk about like
moms on OnlyFans. Get them on the show. I need to speak to them immediately for reasons.
Or like mothers in general in the adult industry and how that. But anyway, that's an episode for future time.
I would love to talk to like, yeah.
So it was shown that Filipino mothers are generally at risk in the freelancing world due to a number of factors. And I think that this is also very similar to the same factors of why they're at risk in regular workplaces. Number one, lack of maternity leave. Not that we have excellent maternity leave or anything. I mean, it's not as bad as the United States. Yeah, it exists. We have maternity leave in regular corporations. That's like a standard. But when you're a freelancer or part of the gig economy, there's no maternity leave. It's often a no work, no pay type of situation. And that puts a lot of pressure on moms. There's also, of course, a lack of knowledge in the gig economy. It's relatively new. So even non-moms don't know a lot about this thing, but then you have people who haven't necessarily stayed on top of current events or current technology because they're mothers. You know, they don't got time for that.
Yep.
And then in general, the lack of like tech knowledge on maneuvering online job sites, promoting their services, finding clientele, social media, all of these things, again, for the same reasons as not knowing much about the gig economy. So overall, really tough time for moms during the pandemic. So
be nice to your mom.
Be nice to your mom, unless your mom is an asshole to you, in which case you are not obligated to do anything.
Exactly. And that's it for part 1 of Sinong Tatay Mo? Gender roles in the Filipino family. Make sure to stay tuned for part 2, where we point the spotlight at everybody's favorite beer drinker, your dad. We'll also shed some light on more non-traditional families, so be sure to come back.
Take us away, producer.
We knew there was no other way. We knew what we had to face, but it still hurt when it happened. I thought my emotions would dampen, but I still don't know where it all went wrong. I must have lost it along the way, the smile you gave me. If I'd known that you would love me only until here, I would have held it dear. Oh, my memory betrays me. The touch of your skin just won't escape me. If I'd known that you'd be gone, I wouldn't have held on. Maybe this would be easier, but
That was How Can I Forget by Erin Lee. After the release of her debut EP, Paper Flowers, singer-songwriter Erin Lee has never let her style of vocal harmony and instrumentation keep her within the confines of a single genre. Using her creativity and versatility as a self-taught producer to branch out into the OPM scene even further, she is one of the faces that make up two of her other side projects, namely acoustic duo CJ and Aaron and Lily Stars Records indie folk duo Lily on the River. You can stream her music now on Spotify. If you're an artist who wants to be featured on the show, we'd be honored. Send your clips to nowopenph@gmail.com.
You got the PH in there this time, though.
Yeah, I got the PH. That's why I got distracted with the .com. Welcome back to Now Open the Podcast, the sex education podcast that's more sex than education. My name is Jobim.
And I am Trisha.
This week, we're talking about gender roles and the Filipino family. In part one, we discussed more traditional families and about our moms. Kind of heartwarming, surprisingly heartwarming. Was not expecting that. This is part two of Sinong Tatay Mo, gender roles in the Filipino family, where we'll talk about the reason your mom drinks, probably your dad. We'll also talk about non-traditional family units and why they're important. So what comes to mind when you think of your dad?
White. Just kidding.
It's like you've got the same chip on your shoulder that Bob Marley had for having like a white dad. Like he spent the rest of his life being like, I'm so black, you guys.
I definitely insist on my Filipino-ness when I'm in any other country. And you best believe if I ever go to the United States, unless my safety depends on it, I'm just going to be like, I'm Filipino. Do not mistake me for the Caucasians.
Until you see some MAGA hat wearing white dudes and you're like, what's up, fellow Caucasians?
See, the reason why I described my dad as white, because that literally happened to him. So he was born in the Philippines. He's actually half Filipino. Born in the Philippines, first language was not English. It was a Filipino language. He went to the States in college. So this was around like the mid-60s. And he got invited to the KKK.
Your dad got invited to the KKK?
He got invited to the KKK, and he had to like just politely decline.
Okay, not just what was their criteria for hiring at that time? You look vaguely Caucasian? Yeah,
like they were just looking for people who were super white, like just so white that they look like they could potentially be a sympathizer.
I guess. I mean, like it's not far fetched to think that the KKK would recruit based on looks. Also, you know, so much of their beliefs are already based on that anyway.
Exactly. It's a lot of them are very surface level about it. And like, wasn't there an entire movie about how a black guy pretended to be part of the KKK?
Yes, there was Black Klansman, I think.
Either. Yeah, so they're not very. So
our producer says something cool. Can we pull this up, please? Imagine if he joined the KKK and destroyed it from within. You fools! I'm Filipino. That's the movie we want. We don't want to watch Black Klansman. We want to watch Black Katipunero.
I mean, it's extra funny because
it's also the KKK.
Yeah, so anyway, that's why I describe my dad as white, but like he's also very progressive. His time in the States in the middle of the 60s was eye-opening to him. He was very, pro LGBTQ even in the 60s. He was already very anti-establishment. He taught me how to question authority. This was all from his time there. So I would say like my dad was like, I guess just white, a very white guy.
Okay. Let's see if we can fit your dad into one of the 4 Filipino archetypes as listed by Alan Tan in 1994. Okay, let's see if we can put your dad in one of these holes. The number 1 is the dilettante. He treats his child very much like a pet, and this is my dad. He enjoys the company of his child, but at his own convenience. If things get stressful, he can always withdraw from the scene. Just fuck right off. Suffering from a sense of alienation and at the same time feel a high need for affiliation, the dilettante's father's sense of alienation limits his involvement in parenting, while his need for affiliation is what propels him to want to be liked by his children. And it is this desire to be liked by your kids, but at the same time not wanting to open up to your kids that creates a very surface level relationship of joy. And he seeks the love of his children, but is also unable to immerse himself fully into the whirl of parenthood. He's still very much his own person, his own individual. And being a father is just like one of the things he does, right?
On the side.
Yeah, on the side. It's kind of like
In
having
his
a pet.
off hours. Yeah.
You only mind your pet when you come home, and even then, when your pet's like sick or dying, otherwise they're just like there. 2, determinative. Okay, so we had dilettante, and now we have determinative. His child represents a project. From pet, we move on to project. High on the need to achieve. The child, in fact, may represent an opportunity for vicarious achievement, or perhaps a chance to rectify some personal failure. These are usually like stage dads, dads of athletes. Oh God, athlete dads. Athlete dads are the worst.
Also, I think like maybe dads in certain industries like law, medicine, who want their children to follow in their footsteps and continue their legacy.
Lawyer dads are annoying. Lawyer dads who are all of his sons have to be those anyway. Just I know a few. His determinative streak also reflects a desire to retain control over most aspects of his life, and by extension, the direction of his children's lives. I'll tell you this: the children of determinative fathers, I've noticed, do achieve in life, but they hate their dads. They fucking hate their dads, dude. They have everything, but they never feel like they earned anything on their own. And so there's a very strong sense of resentment because all their achievements have come from Papa.
I'm sure that this particular type of dad cuts across social classes, but I think it's especially prevalent in the upper class. Yes. You know, like I know some relatively rich people who their dads, the patriarchs, have very specific rules about how their children should live if they want to get their inheritance.
It's sort of like, because I have been so successful in my life, I know better. They have that in their back pocket to be like, yeah, you should listen to me. Of course you should listen to me. Look at how freaking rich I am. Look at your lifestyle, dude. Yeah.
There's only one path to success, and it is this one.
Yeah, and it is this one. It's tried and true. A third is procreator. This man, his role as a father is that of a provider. Okay, so most fathers certainly see the role of provider as a major one, but to the procreator, it can often be the only one that he sees. Right? He is the income, he is the food, he is the money, he is the roof. Having sired a child, he has interest in seeing the child mature and continue the genetic linkage through future generations. Depending on his means and generosity, this can mean anything from the bare essentials to a good education.
So this kind of dad is basically the person who's like, my role is to make sure you become a proper human being.
My role is to oversee your growth.
Your growth. Or your, maybe not necessarily growth, because I can see how this could be
your needs. Like, there you go.
Your
needs are met. Okay, so I think the difference between this one and the first one, the dilettante, doesn't really focus on needs, more of wants. And the determinative parent doesn't really focus on what the child needs, but what they think the child needs.
Yeah, okay.
And the procreator truly focuses on what the child needs, from the bare essentials to a good education. And the last but not least is generative. To the generative father, a child is mainly a charge. There is a basic respect for the child as an individual, a hallmark of trust, autonomy, initiative, industry, identity, and intimacy. Basic trust is a crucial component in the formation of a generative father. He must be able to trust the wisdom of nature and natural processes, the wisdom of the child. The child is seen first and foremost as a responsibility to nurture and care for in terms of what is best for the child. So just looking at it at a glance, I'm starting to think that generative is the best kind of dad.
Yeah, I think that maybe an argument can be made for a provider being like a sort of neutrally bare minimum type. Procreator type of dad is like the kind of bare minimum, but generative is the kind of dad you'd want to aspire to be.
Yes. But it's hard. Again, it seems easy to let your kid take the reins, but you've also seen this approach to child rearing go the opposite way. It's so easy to let your kid go off the rails, right? And you end up turning into one of the other kinds of parents because you're trying to overcorrect. So it's a difficult balance to strike. So Trisha, to answer our episode's question, sinong tatay mo?
I would say that my dad was probably more generative. I mean, obviously, depending on the day and sometimes time period, you're not a single kind of dad, right? There were times when he was
Yeah.
determinative or tried to be at least. But I think overall, as a whole, 95% of the time, he was a very supportive dad. Kind of like tried to build up my self-confidence. Like,
Mhm.
and you know how in The Witcher 3 you can have a bad dad Geralt ending because you
Mhm.
try to control your child's life too much.
Right.
I think my dad tried to have a good dad Geralt ending where he raised me in such a way that I could survive on my own and not have to depend on him to make my decisions.
All
So yeah,
right.
I guess my dad isn't white. He's just a generative Filipino father.
I think my dad is like 90% dilettante and maybe 10% procreator. All right. For today's before we move on to the next half of today's episode, let's kick it up with opening up. For today's opening up, we have an anonymous letter and anonymous writes. I used to specialize. I don't know why specialize is
Oh wait,
in like.
no, this is the wrong opening up.
Oh, this is the wrong opening up. All right, let's
Yes.
pull up a new one. God, I love these
There.
opening up letters. I really do. I am the kind of person who is perceived by most people who is strong or that one who would rather be independent in life. However, when I am in some kind of relationship, I find it hard to balance my reputation per se and handling the relationship because damn it made me become a real softie at the same time I want to stick with the knowledge of who I am. I think it is a pride thing. Is that a bad thing? Unfortunately, as a result, none of the relationships lasted or even made official.
What do you
Okay.
think?
Yeah. Okay, I think this is interesting because it's a growing pain that a lot of people experience. Especially if you're the kind of person who has spent so much of your time trying to become an independent individual. If you spend a lot of time trying to get out of your parents' house, trying to provide for yourself, if you didn't have an easy time with money growing up, you might see yourself, or you might take comfort in seeing your self image as somebody who is independent, somebody who doesn't need anybody. And there's nothing wrong with that until it comes to opening up in a relationship, right? Because so many of these walls that you have put up to make yourself strong and to make yourself successful and to make yourself into the person that you are happy with now gets in the way of a relationship because the walls you have built are for a castle for one. And now you need to expand it to fit another person. And you're saying you're finding it hard to balance your reputation and handling the relationship, which tells me that you're finding it hard to give up the image of yourself that other people have. Not because you're finding it difficult to give it up for yourself because you formed certain habits, but because you like that people see you as an independent person. You like the fact that people see you as a go-getter who is who is responsible for their own destiny. And until you change that to be, I want my friends or I want the people who I care about to see me as somebody who can be vulnerable and who can open up, then you're going to have a hard time opening up in relationships. It is only a bad thing if it gets in the way of getting you what you want. And it seems to me like you want to be in a relationship. So you might want to practice opening up and being vulnerable because as great as it is that you have all the confidence and have found success being an independent person, there's also something to be said for letting people in. What about you, Trisha?
I think what's interesting to me in this particular letter is that the issue is in reconciling the letter writer's own image of their self as a
Right.
strong person
Yes.
and the soft kind of person that they become when they're in love or when they're dating somebody new. And I think it's very, well, I don't want to use the word normal because what's normal anyway?
Right.
But I think it's pretty common for people to become softies when they're in love or when they're
Yes.
dating someone. It doesn't matter how strong you think you are, because you're starting to care for someone else. You're naturally going to be a little quote unquote softer because you care for someone. But being strong and being soft with somebody you're in a relationship with, that's not mutually exclusive. In fact, I think the fact that you're an incredibly independent and self-reliant, self-sustaining kind of person, that is a really good sign that you can care for others, because an empty cup cannot provide. So the fact that you can provide for yourself perfectly well means that you probably have the energy and the space to care for others. So look at it as a strength, that because you're a fully realized person, that you can support others.
I also think
But
that,
yeah,
I also think that opening up yourself up to other people makes you stronger, because it takes strength to be vulnerable.
yes, and strength in numbers, because
Hmm.
one person should not and cannot handle everything.
There you
That is
go.
impossible.
Thank you for sending us that letter. If you'd like to send us your anonymous questions or confessions, you can submit through our opening up form. And now, back to the discussion. We've talked about sort of more traditional families. We've talked about our moms and our dads, because that's what you and I have. But really, what consists of a family? What makes a family? If you ask Vin Diesel, it's just a bunch of cars and a few zany adventures. That's what makes a family. If you ask a 20-something, it's the people that they hang out with like 6 days a week, right? There are different points in time where family means different things to different people. So non-traditional families are everywhere. Non-traditional families are becoming more common in the Philippines, and we see this in same-sex parents with children. Do you know anybody who was raised by same-sex parents?
Raised by no, but I currently know a couple of same-sex parents.
Okay, cool. Single parent families, I see that happening a lot.
That's extremely common.
Adoptive families, but what's different now is the stigma around being a single parent is changing also, whereas before it was frowned upon maybe half a decade ago, even 20 years ago, super frowned upon. Now we see single parents as being strong. Now we see single parents as being heroes, especially if they're doing a good job. Adoptive families also.
Actually, I also want to say about single parent families is that recently, because of COVID, a lot of people have also recently become single parents.
Yes.
So, we're also seeing an increase in non-traditional setups because of just wide-scale grief. Oh, sorry for that suddenly
COVID
depressing
is taking
term.
a lot of parents, yeah. Couples with no children, that is also becoming increasingly common. A lot of my friends are deciding to go childless. Thank you very much.
I would like to think of me and my partner as a family, even though we have no children except for our two beautiful kitties.
Yeah, why doesn't two people make a family? Why don't two people make a family? And then there's, of course, your chosen family, right? And what makes a family? You often hear blood is thicker than water and blah, 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 blah. Your friends are going to let you down, but family is forever. And I just don't find any of these adages to be true, right? I think family are the people you choose to keep in your life that for better or for worse make you, right? And it's that choice that you make, whether or not you decide to keep those people in your life. I think that's what makes people family. Because here's the weirdest thing is that Filipinos are super familial, but they'll also talk the most shit about their family. You know what I mean? Like there's no more toxic pit of snakes with regards to your family's reputation than your own freaking family. So I think the idea of what a family is more malleable now than it ever has been. What do you want your family to look like, Trisha?
Well, by virtue of being a queer person, I think my family already is going to look nothing like the traditional Filipino family, in the sense that we both have vaginas and cats everywhere and no children. Not just because we can't have any together, but because I don't want any. But yeah, I think I just want my family to kind of be I think my family is going to be ever changing. I can see that, people dropping in and out depending on when, because I just want my family to be open. I want it to be people that support and love each other. I want it to be people who talk instead of relying on gender roles and gender expectations to determine who does what in a relationship. And I just want it to be open as hell in every definition of the word.
Man, I don't know what one of the many lessons that I've learned from having a kid is that expectations, they mean nothing. Expectations, you can start there. It's a good starting point, but it has zero bearing on life. Laughs at your plans. Life laughs haughtily at your plans. So I don't want my family to look like anything. I just want my family to be happy. I want them to be good people, right? I'm not imposing any expectations on what I want it to be anymore. I'm just trying to play it by ear, and I'm trying to be what was that? Generative dad. I'm just going to try to be as generative a dad as I can be now that I've learned what that is and what I have to do to be one.
Yeah, and like we talk about non-traditional families because when we talk about gender roles, a lot of these gender roles are already expected when you're in a heterosexual relationship.
Mm-hmm.
The dad provides, the mom is more caring,
Right.
The dad's more authoritarian, the mom is more progressive. Like all these expectations, and even the fact that there's only like 4 ways to be a dad, like
Right.
you
For
know, like we have
archetypal ways.
for archetypal ways, like because men naturally fall into 4 categories, or fathers tend to fall into these categories, rather than being open to all the possibilities. I mean, like,
Mhm.
don't be open to some of those archetypes, but more like, you know, the idea of like being open to, yeah, what roles you can play and not having those expectations set in stone, because families are ever changing. One day
Mhm.
you might be a traditional family and the next day you might not be because of circumstances beyond your control.
Mhm.
And, you know, if you have a non-traditional family, or even if you have a traditional family setup, it's completely up to you to decide what kind of gender roles you want in your family through open communication. Don't expect, don't assume, talk about it.
It's interesting because what is the place of so-called gender roles in a world where families are becoming increasingly non-traditional? You know, we just mentioned same-sex parents, single parent families, adoptive families, couples with no children, chosen family. These are family dynamics that do not fall under traditional gender roles. So, I mean, how important is it to still have traditional gender roles now?
I think the really whole point of gender roles, or why it even existed, is because, yeah, people naturally fall into certain roles depending on what society tells them that they're allowed to do. At first, it started off as like a biological situation, like, oh, women are the ones who get pregnant, therefore they have to be the ones to care for the child because it's necessary. And then
Okay.
these get codified in society. So the gender roles that we have are basically just a reflection of how society expects you to like act, because of all these scripts that we've been following for thousands of years. But now the script is rapidly changing. And
Okay, so without a script, given that there is no script, we know that there are roles. Let's remove the gender from it.
mhm.
Okay, let's say, hypothetically speaking, I know you don't want like to start a family with kids with your partner, but let's say that you did. How would you go about dividing roles now that gender has been excluded?
Well, unlike movies or
Mhm.
television shows that have a script, this is
Mhm.
kind of more like your mumblecore film where
It's a Judd Apatow directed
it's a
feature.
Judd Apatow. Yeah, this is more like, imagine if Judd Apatow directed your relationship, where
He pretty much
you
does.
kind of
I'm living the plot of Knocked Up right now.
Congratulations, you are a leading man.
Thank you. I'm Seth Rogen.
Not a bad person to be. But yeah, basically the idea is that even though you have an outline you know, there are financial responsibilities, there are caretaking responsibilities. Maybe you'll get a house, education, things like that. There's an outline, but it's up to you to decide who takes on which speaking parts, who does which actions, etc. So it's improv. It's a collaboration. It's not decided on by some other person who wrote the script for you. It's your own, and it's tough. Like in the same way that writing your own movie script is tough, it's really tough to write your own script for your relationships and create your own gender roles. It's extra work. And I think that's why a lot of people fall into gender roles, because they don't have to talk about it. They don't have to have
Right.
that uncomfortable conversation about,
There's a template.
yeah, like no more fighting about who does the dishes because you do it because you have a vagina. There's no conversations anymore. You can just fall into it naturally. But
You have to
if
kill
you-
all the cockroaches by virtue of the fact that you have a penis. Like, I hate that.
See, my partner and I had to discuss that because no one has a penis. So we had to figure out who has the penis in regards to the cockroach.
You have the cockroach penis. No, you have the cockroach penis.
But so even the fact that we're talking about, like, you take the lead on this as like you have the penis, we're still reinforcing those gender roles, right? But like,
Right.
see, we're still sticking to that script. But in this case, you take care of the cockroaches.
Mhm.
You can vagina slap the cockroach. No, don't vagina slap the cockroaches. That's disgusting.
Labia clap that shit.
That's way worse than having to do it with the penis.
Well, I think that wraps up our discussion on Sinong Tatay Mo, gender roles in the Filipino family. I'm so glad we got to talk about this because it's for me fairly cathartic to talk about, and I would assume cathartic to listen to for anybody who has experienced these family dynamics in their lives. And since majority of our listeners are from the Philippines, I'm guessing most of you have. I'm hoping that a lot of you guys were able to recognize your family members and hopefully a little bit of yourselves in tonight's episode so that you can better position yourselves in your relationships moving on in the future.
That's beautiful. My takeaway from tonight's episode is that therapy is free when you have a podcast.
So
my
is porn.
Second takeaway from tonight is that families are changing. Our definition of families are changing. And that can only be a good thing because our past definitions of what mothers and fathers and families can be were extremely restrictive.
Mhm.
They really forced people into certain roles, whether or not they actually wanted to take on those roles. As you mentioned with your mom, having to take on a more forgiving role because you were living with your dad. So like you're forced to take on certain roles when you can just be the parent that you want to be. You know, whatever that is, regardless. And I hope that you take a moment to think about this episode, reflect on your own family dynamics, and see how that's affecting the families that you're creating now, the kind of expectations that you're creating in your own networks. And as many people have said over the years, don't let your hurt child make your adult decisions. So I think it's very important to look at your family and see what kind of relationships and communication styles they've modeled for you and expectations and roles so that you can be better and not bring your baggage onto the next generation.
Very well said. Stay updated with Now Open by following us
Wait,
on
not
Facebook.
yet.
Oh, not yet? What?
Personal socials.
Oh, personal socials. Wait, did I skip that? Right. Okay. Personal social promotion. I am on Twitter. I post weird things at like 4 a.m. I know that Trisha saw this one thing where I was like, Gmail Nanjiani. I was laughing for like a solid 3 minutes. Man, when I thought of that tweet, I was like, this is going to blow up so hard. This is going to go viral. I want to wake up. There's going to be like 1 million likes on this thing. I woke up and there was like 4 likes. Gmail Nanjiani. And this is a stupid ass tweet. Anyway, I'm on Twitter at Jobimism. That's JOBIMISM. And I'm also on Instagram. If you want to see what the rest of my life is like, it's just as horrible as the rest of me. It's at Jobim Javier. JOBIM JAVIER.
Right, and I am at Trisha O'Bannon on Twitter.
Okie dokie. Now you can stay updated with Now Open by following us on Facebook and Twitter at NowOpenPH. Our past episodes are also available on YouTube, Spotify, and wherever else you get your podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to our coffee page at www.co-feed.com/NowOpenPH to get bonus content and other special perks, such as a 50% discount on merch we are releasing very soon. The merch looks dope. Take my word for it. And
I have it in my apartment. We just need to figure some stuff out. It's happening. It's moving. I promise.
They look amazing. If you'd like to keep the conversation going, we'll be migrating over to Now Open's Gather Town after the end of the show. Join us at bit.ly/NowOpenTown to chill with the crew and other customers. It's a lot of fun. I enjoy seeing my little avatar dance. You can go up and sing if you have a guitar at home. There's a stage. Come hang out with us. Next episode, next week, the history of mistresses and mastresses, featuring one of our all-time favorite guests, Sab Schnabel. See you when we next open.